you have these plants called hyper-accumulators. They have this fascinating ability of being able to extract certain metal from the soil. Most people don't know it, but in Fukushima, after the nuclear accident, in a lot of places they used sunflower because sunflower is naturally hyper-accumulating uranium. When you open a mine, you need to have certain concentration in the soil that are superior to a threshold that we call the cut-off grade. If you're below it, the inherent value of the metal you extract can't cover the extraction cost. So if you develop another technology like ours that can go at concentration that are below what traditional mining industry can normally extract, then you have an advantage because it means like you have lands that you can operate on, where the mining industry would not be able to extract this metal.
Fabien, thank you so much for having me in your office today. I was wondering where to start, and I came across something which I think is very simple to explain, which is in order for the energy transition to work, we need to electrify everything, or a lot of things at least. But we also don't want to mine metals because it's extremely CO2 intensive and produces a lot of emissions. And at that intersection, there is a company that's trying to solve a problem, which is you, which is trying to leverage plants to produce nickel. Explain me the idea, because I don't get it still. How can a plant extract metals from the soil?
To keep it very simple, you have these plants called hyper-accumulators. They have this fascinating ability of being able to extract certain metal from the soil. Okay. Of course, it's at the atomic level. So it means you have ions that are, I would say, absorbable forms, okay, of metals that penetrate inside the roots and that are then translocated, they are transported inside the root and inside the stem, etc., and they deposit afterwards in the leaves of the plant. Okay. Okay, the evolution theory is always very difficult to say, okay, the plant is doing that for X, Y, Z reason. Nobody really knows. There are some theories around that. One of them that I think is pretty solid is the fact that the plant might do that to defend itself. Because by absorbing, especially nickel, by absorbing so much nickel, you need to understand, for instance, in the lab, we've reached concentration above 7% of the plant that is pure metal. I don't know if you imagine 7%, it's a lot. It's a lot of metal, okay? It's extremely toxic. So if you have an insect or an animal that's eating these plants, we don't know what happens, but because they're not doing it by definition. It's like animals, insects, they can feel that it's not good for them and they're naturally not eating it. Additionally, because on this land where you have a lot of nickel, I would say other type of plants, crops, etc., they can grow. It's a competitive advantage, I would say, for these plants to be able to grow where other plants can grow. So we believe that the reason why these plants are doing that. So far, you need to keep in mind that around 700 species have been discovered in the world that are able to extract metal and are considered hyper-accumulators. So the reason why they are considered hyper-accumulators is because all plants absorb metal, contrary to what we may think. It's just a question of concentration you'll find. So when it's above 0.1% in the plant, you'll consider it's an hyper-accumulator.
0.1%?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's quite low, actually.
It's quite low. It's quite low. For nickel. For other metals, it's a different threshold, I would say. So you consider that. In the best plants, naturally, as I was describing, you can reach 7%. In some trees, contrary to what we may think, in the sap of the trees, sometimes it can go up to 25%.
Okay.
In the sap. Yeah.
And how does that compare with the land in which it sits? Because if we go back to this idea of mining, how much of the soil where traditional mining companies go and extract metals is composed of metals versus what is the rest of it? Like, what's the order of magnitude of what you can extract versus what you need to move?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So first of all, maybe to explain that, it's important to understand that there's nickel everywhere in the world, everywhere. Okay, our planet is has a lot of metal everywhere. It's not only nickel, it can be gold, copper, platinum groups, metals that are not copper, etc. That are not gold, etc. There are a lot of things, okay? And I think what's very, very important to understand is that all of these metals, they sit in different concentrations. So when you open a mine, a traditional mine, you need to have certain concentration in the soil that are superior to a threshold that we call the cut-off grade. If you're below it, the inherent value of the metal you extract can't cover the extraction cost. So because of that, it's a question of there's metal everywhere, but not in sufficient quantities. So if you develop another technology like ours that can go at concentration that are below what the traditional mining industry can normally extract, then you have an advantage because it means like you have lands that you can operate on, where the mining industry would not be able to extract this metal. Okay. And after you have a question of quantities of lands that are accessible. It's very difficult to have a very precise estimation planetary-wise, naturally, but we believe it's between 30 to 40 million hectares that are addressable. Okay, so to give you an idea, if we were to cover everything, so we are targeting 1 to 2 tons of nickel class 1 equivalent per hectare per year, you would be in a situation to produce 6 to 10 times the current output of the nickel mining industry every year. If you were to cover everything.
Just with plants?
Just with plants, yeah. But naturally, it takes time to cover all of this. It's like we're far from being at this production level, I would say. But that the vision is that there's some potential, and naturally, we need to prove that we can be at a cheaper extraction cost in the industry.
And what's interesting there is like it's new nickel. In other words, it's nickel that wasn't accessible before Genomines, right? Like you're saying it's 6 times to 10 times more than what we're producing today, but it's on top of what's existing today, not replacing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Fascinating. How did you come across this idea? I mean, you have a mining background. You also have spent time as a strategic consultant. How do you go from there to, I'll find a plant and it will extract nickel for me?
There's a bit of luck in it. So I had a first company. I set up a first startup. It was a total disaster. We were 3 co-founders, pretty misaligned, actually. And so after it started, basically, I thought like, okay, so I think one of the reasons it failed is because we were misaligned. We were not the right people to do this, and we were not the right people together, I would say. So I figured it's very important to find the right co-founder. So I applied to a program that is designed to support you in finding the right co-founder. It's called Entrepreneurs First. Okay. It's a program that was based in the UK initially. Now it's a bit everywhere in the world. And the design of the program is that it's bringing people together that have very different background in tech, like my co-founder, she's a doctor in plant biotechnology, and background more in business or engineering, like me. Okay. So when I met my co-founder, she's a doctor in plant biotechnology. We had a very genuine discussion about, okay, tell me about mining. She asked me like, tell me about mining, and asked her like, okay, tell me about plants, etc. And back then, one of the only things I know about plants, and that's a remark I made, was the fact that on top of open pit mines, some plants manage to survive and grow and thrive. I would say on the mine itself and in the immediate surroundings. And back then, for me, it was a bit fascinating in a way because it's quite a harsh environment. You have dust, you have water, you have chemicals, etc. Sometimes, so you have vibrations because you have explosions, etc. So it's kind of a harsh environment, and still nature managed to find a way to thrive. And so that's exactly what I asked her, and she had worked on this plant back then.
For people that don't know how a mine works, usually, can you explain a little bit of the process? It feels like I don't know who invented that process. It works well, of course, but it seems crazy to me. Explain it for me in quick 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I think some caveats is that if some people that are listening to this are basically experts in the mining industry, they need to understand that I'm oversimplifying here.
Yes.
I think it's very important to understand that based on the method you intend to mine, there are very, very different processes. Okay, But I'll give like a very simple explanation here for nickel, which is the metal we're addressing. Okay. Again, super different based on the metal. So on nickel, you have two types of geological deposits. You have one type of deposit that's called a neutramorphic laterite. It's more on the surface. And one type of deposit that is quite deep underground that we call a sulfide. Okay. So for the sulfide deposit, it's a rock. So you need to go there, okay, explode some rock, and basically get it back, and then you need to crush it, okay, and then you need to process it. To process it, most of the time it involves high pressure, sulfuric acid as well, and basically a long time of leaching to get to, I would say, a kind of juice in a way with nickel that has been precipitated as a form of a nickel sulfate. And then that you then treat and wash, etc., to get to certain, I would say, products being mixed hydroxide precipitate, nickel sulfate hexahydrate, etc. But it's easily becoming quite technical. It's not necessary. On the other side, you have, I would say, soils that are more on the surface. So it's a blend of soils and rock that you rip. So basically, literally, you're ripping like the first layer of soil, and then you're processing part of it. So basically, you're sorting it out, and then you're processing it to recover nickel, kind of the same way, I would say, with high pressure, at high temperature, high quantity of acids, etc. So it's kind of I mean, a lot of mining groups are trying to do their job pretty well, actually, contrary to what we may think or whatsoever, because
Contrary to what I think, looking at you right now.
yeah, it's like contrary to what we may think, it's like it's not black or white. It's just like you have miners really trying to do their job well. It's just they need to move enormous quantities of mass to produce very tiny amount of metal. And so because of that, you end up being in a position where their job is just tough. It's very tough not to impact the environment.
Yeah, I mean, if I summarize the process, is basically like exploding rocks and then crushing them to the smallest level, and then trying to take out everything that's on the ground. Like you can't think about a process that would be more impactful and harmful on nature and biodiversity, because just talking about CO2 emissions is one thing, but like biodiversity as well is another topic, which obviously mining is well known for being able to, I don't know, kill animals and destruct species. But anyway, not trying to make an argument there. Look, you mentioned something which I find interesting, is the fact that you've selected nickel. From what I've read before, and as you said, plants are able to extract basically any metals. That's basically anything that's on the ground, a plant is able to extract it to a certain amount, obviously. Why did you choose nickel rather than something else like rare earth materials or whatever that is?
So when we started, we built something we call a prioritization matrix. So we tried to, paradoxically, when we started, we tried to do something simple. Okay. Let's start with one parameter. We took like close to 30 parameters. I'm not going to go through all of them, but some parameters you need to take into account is where the deposit is located. Okay. If you target tungsten, for instance, or gold, or what can I think of? It depends. You can have many metals that you might find on the surface, but very often you might find deep underground. The problem is that the roots of the plant will not be able to access the deposits. You can take it. Okay. You have another parameter you could take into account, that the fact that some metals are able to move in the organism, which we call the bioavailability. Some of us don't move that well, you see. And so because of that, it's a reason why, for instance, for gold, even mining groups are doing that. They're using cyanide. Okay. You need to use cyanide because you need to make it bioavailable to recover gold. It's not the only technique that's used, but my point is that if the metal can't move that much, it means the plant will have trouble extracting it. Then you have a question of, naturally, it needs to be sufficiently expensive. Otherwise, it's very difficult to justify an operation to do that. We took into account as well some criteria, I would say, of criticity. So nickel is on the CRM list, I would say, of the US, of Europe, of Australia, etc., etc. So we know it's paradoxically, this is what is interesting. Like nickel is very, very not rare. It's very common actually in the crust, but it's not that easy to produce at the right cost, I would say, and therefore you end up being in a situation that we have the impression that it's rare and that we don't have enough, which is true to some extent. But the thing is that it's not rare. It's just difficult to find the right deposit at the right concentration and at the right extraction cost.
Yeah, I think it's not rare, but nature is well done so that nature is well constructed so that basically it forces humans to think outside the box and about other solutions than just purely the natural process of mining, um, because you have to go and extract it from land that was previously not viable economically for mining groups. So that also, I mean, to some extent, you could argue that nature has done a great job at pushing you and Dali thinking outside the box. Otherwise, you could also imagine a world where basically it's profitable everywhere, and so like we just do mining as it is today, right?
Yeah.
So, um, I'm curious, when you start that idea, and you go and pitch investors, what does that look like?
I mean, most people we engage with, they thought we were completely crazy. You see, frankly, we spoke with a lot of funds. I don't have the exact number, but hundreds of funds, literally. Most of them thought we were crazy. But back then, what happened is that we had a fund, a US fund, very big fund called Lower Carbon Capital, backing us very early, and they just said like, no, we believe actually it's a good idea, and they're like, exactly, that's exactly that. So our first round was a seed round, and we raised $5 million in 5 weeks. We got a term sheet. It was back in 2021. It was way easier to be fair. It was way easier to raise funds, and and so we had another US fund. I would say that wanted to invest. Eventually, we took low carbon, and just after that, we went on for close to 3 years, developing our technology, etc. Because you need to understand we have R&D timelines that are pretty long. I know nowadays we're seeing a lot of startups, I would say, that are involved in AI, especially. And like after a year, like they're making, I don't know, 100 million euros of revenue or whatsoever. It's like, it's absolutely not our case. For us, it's taking time because we are constrained by the life cycles, basically. So we have to wait for the plant to grow and transform it, etc., etc. So it takes time. And just after that, we went on and we've done Series A recently. We closed in September of $45 million. So um, we're and now we're in this situation where we need to scale the team. We need to conduct company building, I would say, and be in a situation where what's very important for us is to prove that we can be cost competitive with the industry.
Yeah, and I'll make a small pause here and say, if anyone is listening and is an expert in this technology and want to contribute, I'm pretty sure Fabien want to talk to you. Let's go back to your story. So Lower Carbon comes in, finances a company for 5 million. I think it shows that Lower Carbon is able to take risk and also understand deep tech, which is quite interesting, because I would say it's not a coincidence that Lower Carbon came in for Genomines and not other funds. I think it's because they have a deep understanding of what the future needs when it comes to climate, and also what are the technologies that are able to get us there. Something you mentioned, which I find very interesting, is the R&D cycle. I have the impression, and you'll tell me if I'm wrong, but I have the impression that basically up until the Series A, you were really an R&D company. So your job was to find the best plants and enhance it as much as you could so that it could extract metals. I'm curious, how do you think about this first few years of R&D and how that created a strategic advantage for you? Because I think people might not realize it, but I think that was the period that's probably the most critical for the company. So curious to hear your take on that.
I would say it was a strategy since the start, in a way where So I think when you start this type of projects, at the beginning there's a very big element of unknown, where you just don't know if your technology is going to work or not. Truth be told, it's like you have theories and you have assumptions, etc. But many of them you can't validate before a very long time. To give you an idea, like one of the plants we're using, for instance, which was very poorly studied in the past. It was discovered in the 90s, if I'm not mistaken, and it was not really studied. Like we didn't even know if the plant was diploid, tetraploid, or whatever. Meaning, like we didn't even know the number of version of genes that this plant had. For us, like we are diploid, we have one version of our. I'm oversimplifying, but we have one version of our genetic material from our fathers, everyone from our mother, and that's it. For a plant that can be absolutely not that. That can be way more. Because it's because the plant is just a being that's very different than us. So we didn't even know that. We didn't even know how to grow these plants. We didn't even know like if it would be possible to transform it or not. So our strategy at the beginning has been to be like, okay, we're going to massively invest on research and development. And for years actually, I was alone. There was tech stuff, including my co-founder, that is there's a very impressive background in tech. We've not covered that, but she was published in Nature several times, etc. It's like she's a very impressive person, and there was me. So I was doing the other things, but you need to understand at the beginning, like it's for us. I don't know. For us, it was a right strategy to invest massively into this, because we are like, okay, if we don't make it technologically speaking, it's like there's no point. There's just no point into what we're doing.
So in order for you to win, do you think like you needed superior technologies? That was the pure play, is like having the best technology in the world to do that?
That's what we think. That's what we still think. Because most companies, I would say most startups, it's not true for everybody, especially not in climate. But I would say many startups, their main challenge is to sell. Okay, they have a product or whatever that they've developed, and they need to find product market fit, and then they need to sell, because by selling, basically they show investors, etc. That's very attractive, and eventually they reach profitability, blah blah blah, etc. etc. For us, the profitability is directly linked to our technology, because you need to understand that we have zero control over price. The price of nickel is basically traded on two exchanges, on the Shanghai Metal Exchange and Shanghai Metal Market, in the London Metal Exchange. And that's it. So you have you have a set price. You're producing something that is extremely standard. So in a way, we are absolutely not innovative in terms of products.
Yeah, it's a commodity.
Yeah, it's a commodity. Like the innovation really comes from the extraction process. And so your extraction process, you need to make it extremely competitive in terms of financial performance. So meaning like reaching very good yields and having the lower cost possible. And that's the only thing that matters. And for us, so it's basically like not only you need to produce at an extremely cheap cost versus the industry. And as long as you're cheaper than your competitors, the better. And actually, if together you can blend, I would say, a sustainability aspect, which is what we're doing, you win on everything. I would say the sustainability impact, we've already conducted an LCA, and not only on carbon, by the way, but on water and different elements, but we're also trying to prove now that basically we can be cheaper than the industry. And that's really the big focus we're having at the moment.
Are you able today already to produce some nickel, and if yes, at which price versus the industry?
Yeah, so we've produced samples already, so several tens of kilos of nickel sulfate hexahydrate, which is directly used into lithium-ion batteries. I can disclose some people we're working with, but there's some I can't. Okay, we're working with some automakers. One of them is one of our clients has invested as well, and that's public. It's Hyundai, so I can disclose that. There are other automakers that prefer to remain confidential, so I can disclose this. Also working with the battery industry, so people are coming before, I would say, the automaker. And I would say we are working as well with commodity traders. One of them that's public, it's Ocean Partners, for instance. So we we're really working with the entire value chain. So maybe to stop here very quickly, once you've produced metal, it's only the very, very beginning of a very long value chain. After having produced this metal, assuming you've transformed it at the right quality, etc., it needs to be processed to form cathodes. Okay, then the cathode is assembled with an anode to form like a cell. And then you have different cells that are assembled to form like essentially a battery. This battery is integrated into a car, and you're using your car basically. But that's the way you produce like an electric vehicles.
What is Genomine today? Is that a technology company? Is that a mining company? Like, what is the goal for Genomine? Do you want to sell as much as you can nickel, or do you want to license the technology to others? Like, what is your plan for Genomine? Because I think those are two very different avenues.
Yeah. No, you're correct. I think for us, it's not one or the other, but rather one and the other. So we've seen companies that have, because contrary to what we may think, there are many innovation in the mining industry. Okay, something that maybe you've covered it during one episode. I don't know, but a lot of people have found a way to extract lithium in a different manner using direct lithium extraction. Pumping geothermal water and basically absorbing the lithium using membrane exchange, for instance, of type of technology. And I would say that many of them have developed several models at the same time. So in some projects, they're operating their own assets. So sometimes they're operating their own extraction site, I would say. In some of the cases, they're providing the technology for someone else to extract, etc., etc. So sometimes you have joint ventures. You can do a lot of things. What is certain for us in terms of strategy is that the first step, I would say, is to develop the project ourselves, because we need to learn. It's very difficult to sell a technology, especially like ours, that is complex, because when you do agriculture, it's not as simple as okay, you buy you buy a plant, you put it in the ground, and it's gonna work. And no, it's like you need to have like a very regular monitoring. You need to sometimes adjust what you're bringing to the plant. It's a living organism. So because of that, there's some complexity built in our technology, I would say. So because of that, the first thing we need to do is build our own asset, build our own projects, and after you can have different type of business model that live together.
So you're basically becoming a farmer.
We have to, and that's when you discover how difficult agriculture is.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm assuming that during that journey, because we skipped a few steps, but you were talking about the beginning and how you selected the plants and why nickel. I'm assuming that it didn't, you didn't snap your finger and all of a sudden the plant is absorbing nickel at a perfect concentration and it's working well. You're not a scientist and you're not always spending time in the lab, so how did you feel like the day your scientists called you and they're like, hey, like we finally have something that the industry wants, like even if it's as micrograms quantity? Like, how did you feel the day that you discovered that actually what you were working on was actually possible? Because I'm assuming there probably was a bit of time between the start of the company and the day you had even the tiniest amount of nickel in your hand that was sellable to the industry.
It's a very good point. So the plant is extracting metal naturally. So paradoxically, there was nickel in the plant very quickly, but not at the right concentration. And especially when we processed these plants to recover nickel phosphate exhydrate, it was not at the right purity for a very long time. And at some point, it was I can share it now. For some point, it was really concerning, because we're like, maybe there's something we've not anticipated. It's something chemical or whatsoever that's preventing us from getting the right purity, the right quality of nickel that would be sellable, I would say. And eventually we managed. And so when when we managed,
Simple as that.
yeah, I didn't do it myself. So we have a brilliant team of scientists that was assembled by my co-founder that managed to get to that stage. You see, and when we got to that stage, we were shouting. Literally, we were wow. It was freeing us. I would say from a weight we had on our shoulder and saying like, oh my god.
Yeah, because one of the biggest risks that lower carbon took by financing Genomines is that basically, you could have never got there. And basically, like if the tech doesn't work, then you're out of
Techno
business, right?
No,
Like,
no.
Genomine doesn't exist anymore. Um, you already talked a little bit about the market size and the opportunity, but in terms of like, basically you could unlock 6 to 10 times what we're producing today if you were to cover the entire planet, which, talks to the level of ambition that you have. But um, I'm curious to see, how big can Genomines get in the future? Are you going to start at nickel? What's the plan for the company?
So we're already working on other metals, especially on cobalt and rare earth elements. Um, I think I can say it. I think it's public, so
Otherwise, I'll cut it.
nobody can disclose it. So yeah, I mean, ideally we'd like to work on other methods. The thing is that paradoxically we are infrastructure constrained because when you need to understand some plants that we are using, they are naturally able to absorb different metals. Okay, but they are not absorbing all metals. It doesn't work like that. They most of the time they have a strong preference for one metal or the other. I don't know why. Let's say it. I don't know why, but they have a strong preference for one metal. Okay, so when you want to extract other type of metals, sometimes it turns out like your plant is doing it already naturally, but maybe it's not doing it very well, and maybe you want to work on another plant. The different operational consequence of that is that when you have a greenhouse, for instance, very quickly you realize that if you want to run a lot of experiments, your greenhouse is full. And if you want to deploy your technology and your efforts on a lot of metal, then mechanically you need several greenhouses. And very quickly they are being full. And then you need more and more and more and more and more. So our experience is that there's a lot of inflation on the place requires. So if you need to develop your technology on a lot of metals, it's actually costing a lot of money. Not so much because you can't parallelize the work that your team is doing, but rather because you need infrastructure.
That makes sense. And so the value of what you're doing today is basically being able to change the genomes of, because we didn't talk about that so far,
Yeah.
actually, I realize it's basically changing the genome so that you improve the natural ability of the plant to absorb metals. That's what you're trying to do. And now you're saying you're doing it on nickel mostly, but you could also do cobalt and probably many others as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
How do you think about site selection then? Because in order for you to do it successfully, I'm assuming you just don't go in your garden and put your plants and that happens, right? Like you probably have to select the right places in order to put your plants. How do you do that?
It's very complex. We also think about it at a planetary scale. Okay, the first thing you want to do is you need to sort out countries where you just can't operate. It's too dangerous because maybe there's war or whatever. Okay, you have other criteria where you can sort out very very quickly in terms of do you believe that you can enforce some IP defensibility, because at the end of the day we're developing a technology. So if someone can steal it from us just quickly and with no consequence, that can be a problem. Okay, we're looking at so you have like macro factors like this one. Once you've done that, you've sorted out like a lot of countries. Then you look at the availability of labor, okay, of agricultural labor, because you're a farmer at the end of the day. You're looking at I would say at the presence and location of infrastructure, okay, because you need roads, electricity to some extent, these kind of things. And then naturally you go down to the site specific consideration. So you need to have nickel, very like the plant can synthesize the metal, so you need to have the metal that is extractable in the site. You need to have the right concentration. So again, there are concentrations that are below what the mining industry would target normally, or whether you still need to have some nickel in the soil. You would look as well at I would say geochemical properties of the soil, because even if the plant can survive in harsh environments, it needs to have certain nutrients that are there, I would say. So you look at all of this availability of water, etc. It's quite long. I'm not going to cover all of the
Of course.
parameters, but there are many of them we are looking at to make sure that we can narrow it down to certain sites where then we deploy.
And does that come from like a software and, observation, let's say from the sky and, like kind of geographical assumption of what the Earth looks like? Or is it more you have to go underground and dig out some dirt and, try and figure it out?
It's a combination of both. At the beginning, you have an approach that's more like a desktop approach, I would say. So you're using computer, you're right, and you're trying to understand the way a geological formation like nickel laterite forms. Okay, luckily for us, it's a phenomena of formation that is quite well known. Okay, it's the same for sulfide, etc., but it's too deep in any case for us, so we're not addressing that. But on the surface, we understand quite well the way, so we know where to look. I would say. And then sometimes you can tap into previous exploration campaigns as well that have been done where there's occurrences of nickel. And once you've selected your area as well by satellite, you can identify certain level of infrastructure as well.
Mm-hmm.
You can see if you go on Google Earth, you'll see if there's a road, for instance, or not. It can be very simple. So thanks to that, you can narrow down your target, and afterwards, yes, you have to do a bit of sampling, and you're using I would say equipment that are relatively affordable, like an XRF. It's giving you basically the concentration of nickel and other elements you'll have in a sample of soil.
So there is no kind of Google map for nickel. That doesn't exist, right?
I don't think so. And if there's one, it's like if someone that's listening to this knows something like very interesting. No, to be fair, we are trying new technologies
Mm-hmm.
that are not developed by us, but developed by others on basically on I would say on exploration. Sometimes we look at it in a bit of a skeptical way, probably the way that our partners looked at us years ago. I would say, but yeah, we're looking at these technologies and we're trying to see what, because we are exploring in a way that most mining groups don't. Most mining groups are not exploring on the surface. They're exploring, okay, maybe the superficial layer, but in the case of laterite, more like the saprolite. We're looking at the limonite, which is like this very superficial layer of soil.
You just said that your partners were skeptical about you in the past. Has it changed?
Yeah, for some of them, yes, not all of them, but for some of them, yeah, of course, they were very skeptical because it's very new. So and it's still new in a way. So people, I think the intellectual effort of realizing that actually all plants are doing that. Paradoxically, like it sounds crazy, and at the same time, when you fertilize the plants, when you fertilize a field, you're adding NPK in your field,
Which is?
Potassium, etc. You see, so you're putting nitrogen, for instance. So you're kind of already adding some elements in the soil. There are even some flowers. They have different colors based on the type of metal you'll find, like iron you'll find in the soil. So it's not something that crazy. If you think about it, most people don't know it, but in Fukushima, for instance, after the nuclear accident, they use in a lot of places, they used sunflower, because sunflower is naturally hyper-accumulating uranium, certain isotopes of uranium. So it's actually used in many different industries, even if people might not be aware of it.
What have you done the last few years that has changed the way the industry looks at you?
That's a good one. What have we learned?
Or, what have you done differently from, because ultimately the same idea as you were having a few years ago, but what has happened in order for them to be convinced now?
You're not going to like the answer. I prefer to tell you. I think the world over the last years has changed quite a lot and I know it's not rocket science what I'm saying here, but paradoxically, I think there's less emphasis on climate change, and there's more emphasis on unit economics. When you start this project, you don't really know where you're going to get to, okay? But when you get a very high concentration in the plant, as we did, it means that they're the way to extract that would be cost competitive. And because of that, it's changing completely the way people look at you. Because now you're not selling a project that is good for the environment, which is cool. But unfortunately, if it doesn't bring money, it can be a problem for some players to buy in the project. But the moment you tell them, oh, actually, I could be cheaper than the big part of the industry, then that's very different. You know, very recently, for instance, the nickel price was around $15,000 per ton. To give you an idea, just below that, at $14,500, you have approximately 40% of the market that is losing money.
Okay.
So it means like 40% of the miners, of the producers of nickel are losing money. And that was very, very close. So it means like significant, I don't know the proportion exactly, but significant proportion of mining producers were losing money back then. Now the price has grown a bit, okay, because there were restrictions on mining permits in Indonesia, etc. It's still not that high. So it means that there's a strong pressure. There's a strong pressure on cost. If you manage to extract this nickel at a significant discount, where target $10,000 to $11,000 per ton, then you're in first quartile. It means like you're in a positioning on the cost curve that is quite advantageous versus the rest of the market.
So you're basically that you won on the cost curve. That's what you're saying. Like the ability for you to win is the cost curve. That's what it comes back to. And like you were saying, I won't like your answer, but to be honest, I came to the conclusion recently after having done so many conversations like this, that basically we are in a capitalist system. You have to play with the rules if we want to change the world for the better, and to be able to solve for the climate crisis. The best way is to play the capitalist game and therefore have better unit economics. If you do that, everybody wants your product. So, came to the conclusion that's the way to go.
Exactly.
So you were saying earlier, you just raised quite a big round, one of the largest last year, I believe, convinced quite a few interesting investors like Engine, Fabien, Wind, Impact, a few others. I think what's happening, and I was talking to one of your teammates before this conversation, what's happening for you right now is like you're transitioning from being an R&D company into a commercial company. How is that transition going?
Yeah, exactly. We're moving from, I would say, a strong R&D focus more towards an operation focus. So we're lucky enough, more than a year ago now, a year and several months ago, we recruited Sylvia in our team. She's our head of operations, and she has an extensive experience in running mining sites. So she was the CEO at Genomines, Chrome Mining, which is a group that's making $5 billion per year. And so she's bringing like a lot of expertise, a lot of experience in doing this, because me and my co-founder, at the end of the day, we're very willing, or whether we're quite young, I would say. So and we came to this conclusion very quickly. So we're trying to equip ourselves with professionals that are, I would say, significantly more experienced than us. I can't disclose it right now, but we have a professional that we're going to recruit normally beginning of February. That brings like 25 experience at Apple, for instance, in managing and growing a team. So basically, it might feel like quite far from what we're doing, but this person is an expert at, I would say, building teams of and concentrating talents. You see, so basically, we got to the conclusion that for this next phase, we need to equip ourselves with a lot of talents, with new people that are potentially more experienced. And you see, that most of the time way more experienced than us. So that's our strategy at the moment. So it's going well for the moment, I would say, but time will tell, I guess. So we can have this podcast again in 2 years, and I'll tell you how we're doing.
How do you feel when the company like basically you were in a company where you understood everything that's happening in the company. You could contribute to everything, or at least kind of try to contribute to everything. And not all of a sudden you hire people that are better than you because they need to run the show for you. How do you feel losing that sort of control over the company? I don't know if it's losing control, but at least like you have to, let other people run it for you, because it's part of what you're like. Your role actually right now is just recruit the best people and let them do their best work, right? How do you feel about that?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think pretty good because it's suddenly you realize, oh my god, you you're bringing people that it was the case already before, but it's more and more the case where you have a form of when you start your company, it's like you and your co-founder, so you have to do everything, and so you're an expert at nothing, but still you have to figure it out. So you have to recruit people, and yeah, believe me, we've learned our lessons. Recruiting the bad people, then you need to fire people, etc. It's so you have this. You have to run the tech. So it's more on my co-founder side. You have to run the operations. You have to communicate. You have to fundraise, etc. etc. But you have to do everything, and I believe that at the beginning you're doing everything pretty much in average way. Then you need to then when you get to be equipped with the right professional, I would say, suddenly the work is done extremely well, and this is extremely pleasant because you've known, I would say, this phase before where it's not so comfortable because you know your work is like, all right, you're doing it, which is the most important. I feel the most important is like you have to make the company advance, which is the most important. And like sometimes you're like, I'm not so proud of what I've done. But when you have these very, very talented people that are joining you and doing the work that they've done for quite some time, and they keep on doing it very well in your company, it's very, very nice.
Yeah, I've had a lot of conversation with early stage investors, and those that have had funded company before often say that they know what's under the desk, kind of thing. I don't know if that's the right expression, but just to say that at the earlier stages, you know that if you dig deep enough, you will see stuff that you're not particularly okay with. But that's the game. Like you have to do everything, as you said. Like you're basically a couple of people trying to do everything. Look, there are a couple of things I want to talk about before we end this podcast. The first thing is about the reality of fundraising for deep tech startups in Europe. You came into it with, from what I've heard from your investors and other people that I know around you, with a very large ambition, with the goal in mind to say, I'm not going to stop until I get there. It took you a bit of time, right?
Yeah.
14 months, is that correct? Maybe 12 months, I don't know. I'm curious, how do you stay focused when you know that you have one goal, which is to raise this large round in order to grow the company, but you also, keep having people saying no and having problems and, a bunch of things that happen to you?
I mean, we could comment on that for like yeah, quite a lot of time, I think. Let's see. I think there's a psychological element to that. First of all, that's by far the most important, because the real fight, I think, is against you, because you have to stay focused. It's extremely tiring. I was really, really tired, really stressed, etc. Because I guess what, you have 30 people, um, and at some point, like, you're wondering, like, okay, we'll have to tell them that they don't have a job anymore. That's a weird question. That's a weird question. So, and you're seeing the money getting. I mean, that's what a startup is, especially in deep tech, because at the beginning you're not making a lot of revenue, etc. So you're loss making.
Did you make any revenue in the first 3 years?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
We made around 200,000 euros.
Okay. Well, so very minimal for like
Very
30
minimal.
people, right?
Yeah, you can't live with that. It was mainly linked to proof of concepts, where we basically sold metal, but at a price that was significantly higher than the market price, as you might expect, because you're financing innovation as well by doing it like this. And so, yeah, because of that, you need to stay focused and say like, okay, it's going to work, it's going to work, it's going to work, it's going to work. But you have this pressure of investors in front of you that are telling you no, necessarily, because if they were telling you yes, you would close your round and that would be it. But they are telling you no. So you keep on pushing, you keep on discussing with more people, trying to convince, etc. And for like for top tier funds, Engine is the fund of the MIT, for instance. For Bayern, it's like a massive fund of 5 billion in the Netherlands. There are very very few funds, VC funds in Europe of this size. I think there must be 2 or 3 or something like that in Europe as well. So I would say when you need to convince this type of fund, it takes a lot of time when you have a technology like ours, because they want to, and they're right, they want to check a lot of things regarding the technology, regarding your operation, regarding your team. We got 2 funds in lead funds, I would say, in the brand as well. One of them is Deep Tech and Climate Funds, that's based in Germany. They are basically backed by the Minister of Industry, and they had an approach that was very different as well. But I think they went quite deep. They went quite deep in terms of due diligence, technical due diligence, etc. But essentially, I think it was a very healthy process, because it's also like when you're being asked a lot of questions about your business, it's forcing you to wonder, maybe I should have done that differently or whatsoever. Like, and when you're finally after this process of fundraising, then you're starting back on company building. I would say, and you're implementing some stuff that's maybe in another setup you would not have thought of.
I was talking to a great friend of yours, and he said that you're known to be a little stubborn.
Yeah, I'm very stubborn.
Is that what got you to where you are today, do you think?
Very difficult to say. I think there's in fundraising, like in life from German, I think there's a part of luck as well. I think it's important to say. If you try a lot, I believe at some point. I mean, some people, to be fair, some people try a lot and it just doesn't work. That's why I'm saying like there's as well a part of luck. But yeah, I would say like I'm really trying. Like I'm really committed to my job, and I'm committed to the people that are working with me, I would say. Yeah.
I think you're also known to be a great aggregator of help, of support around you. You're able to rally the people around you and push them toward the goal. Do you think that's important when you build a startup?
Yeah, absolutely. I really think so, because come on, you need to sell to people that you're gonna extract metal with plants. You need to understand like people have to want to support you, because it's too easy to say no. If you don't believe in it or whatsoever, it's too easy to say no, because people have their life, they have other things to do or whatsoever. And like and you were there actually when at the end of the fundraising, we invited, I don't know, 100 people, like just to celebrate with us on our fundraising. And the main message was for people to realize it takes a village, it takes a lot of people actually to fundraise, because enormous amount of people are supporting you or making intros or challenging, for instance, your pitch deck, your financial modeling, your approach, or recommending to discuss with certain funds, etc., etc., etc. So yeah.
And I think you got a lot of support from a lot of great people. So also shows that you're good at doing that. But look, we're getting towards the end of this episode. I'd love to try and have some sort of a crystal ball and predict a future. What has to be true in order for Genomines to become a leader in mining?
I would say we need to be significantly cheaper than the industry in terms of extraction cost. I think if this is true, it's enough.
So that's the one key metric you have in your head is cost.
Yeah. Yeah, because we can't influence the price of nickel. And if one day we can influence the price of nickel, it would be a very, very good problem to have.
Yeah, it means you have been quite successful.
Yeah.
If we fast forward a few years, what does Genomines look like?
Depends how far you fast forward.
10 years?
Yeah, 10 years, I think we could be operating let's say around, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 countries, maybe, who knows, on very large surfaces, and opening sites that are actually farm and that are like producing metal in a way that I have it in mind. Actually, it's just a farm where you would harvest your plants and process it directly on site. You'll have a potter, and this potter you have strong quantities of metal, 20, 30, 40, up to 50%. And basically you sell it afterwards to the metallurgical industry for them to do the final refining. But this is what I have in mind. Yeah.
Could farmers operate the farm the way they do it today?
They would need some training, I would say, but the equipment that is required is not special. So I think there's nothing standard in agriculture, right? But we could operate, yes, with normal tractors, combine harvesters, these kind of things.
And maybe a couple of last questions. The first thing is, what's your ambition with Genomines? How far do you want to get?
As far as as long as I'm the good person, the right person, I would say, for this company, and actually I want to stay. But I also understand that if it becomes like a very big company or whatsoever, so like maybe there will be discussion with my investors who are saying like, I might not be the
The
best person for the company, and I want the best for the company. So,
and how far can Genomines get as a company, do you think?
I don't think there's a limit.
Lovely.
There are many methods.
Well, if people is listening and they want to help you, what are some of the things they can do?
So we're recruiting quite a lot of people at the moment in plant biotechnology, but as well in operations, in several sectors. So all of this is on Lever. So if people tap Lever Genomines, they find like our job offers that are open at the moment. What else? Look, we're always happy to have a nice discussion. If it's interesting, if people have ideas or whatsoever. I was very happy that we're starting to communicate more. In the past, we are revamping entirely our websites because our website is.
I like it.
No, our website is good, but I mean, it's the many things we could. I would say, yeah, we could describe it in a better way. I would say maybe explain a bit better the technology, these kind of things, and we're not doing it at the moment. I would say so.
I hope this podcast helps to get there. And
absolutely.
Always happy to do an introduction as well to Fabien or the team if I can help. Well, look, listeners, if you like this episode and if you like the show, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube, or to give us a follow and a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And I'm just going to say, go, Fabien Genomines. I'm cheering for you from the sideline.
Thank you so much,
Fabien.
Thank you so much.